Right, we're gonna be live soon.
Okay, do you all want to wait a couple minutes to let people trickle in?
Maybe another minute.
Okay.
Does that sound good, Jordan and Jake?
Yes, that sounds good.
Sorry, I was trying to talk on mute earlier, so.
It's okay. That's why I was like,
do the best of us.
I was panicking. I was about to type out, I cannot hear anybody, but now I don't feel so bad.
You know, still not used to it.
Well,
I was practicing my everything's fine face. I was like,
it's not a virtual presentation if there's not one person who's on mute, right? So, or a virtual meeting.
Definitely. Okay, well, we can go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us. We have a great presentation today, so be sure to utilize the chat feature. We still have that open, and I will leave the reins to the presenters.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Felicia Perodin. I will admit, this is a little awkward, not being able to see you all out there. But anyhow, I'm pleased to be here today with my co-workers, my colleagues, my partners in crime, my lunch buddies, Jordan Frederking and Jake Shaw. And we're actually going to tell you a little bit more about what we actually do as we move through the presentation. Please feel free, like Lexi said, use the chat if you've got questions. And thank you to Jay and to Ryan for already saying hello to us. So that way we do know that there are live people out there. So thank you very much. And so before we get started, so we really want to get an idea of kind of who's in the room. So if you could, in the chat, give us an idea of kind of where you're at in your career. Like, are you a current graduate student? Are you somebody who has 1 to 3 years of full-time experience? Or are you somebody who has 4 years or more of full-time experience? So feel free to just drop that in the chat. Good afternoon, Joel. Again, if you can just let us know kind of 4+. Okay, so yeah, if you can just let us know if you're a current grad student, if you have 1 to 3 years of full-time experience or 4 years of more. Hi, Talita. Talita's here at the U of A. All right. Go ahead and just keep dropping that in, and we are going to move on to the rest of our presentation.
Yes, we'll give you kind of a quick overview. So as Felicia said, we'll introduce ourselves a little bit more and talk about ourselves a little bit further into the present. We'll start by going into the benefits of considering positions outside of the traditional residence life track, briefly share kind of our career journey. Then we're going to walk you through the steps of creating your own university housing career development plan. So that way you kind of like look at taking those next steps for yourself potentially. And then at the end, we'll have time to answer any questions or kind of further that discussion.
And as always with any kind of presentation, we have some learning outcomes, and we hope that as a result of attending this presentation today, that you'll be able to walk away and identify what career paths within university housing like there are. If you weren't aware of certain ones before, you'll be able to know them now. understand how to create a career plan and apply your current skill sets to from your residence life position to other potential positions, and be able to match your skills outside of the residence life area. So really want to, by the end of this presentation, hope you can walk away with a good idea of where you can go next in your career path and in your journey in university housing, and hopefully we can give you some good ideas of how to get there.
And so one of the things before I transition to the next slide is one of the like Jordan and Jake and I, we are all at very different points in our career paths. And so we recognize that for some people, housing is going to be the gig that they want to do their entire careers, either in student affairs or in their work environment. But that's not necessarily something that everybody is a lifer. But I think that's one of the unique things that we find about housing is there's a lot of great opportunities you can get. We also know that particularly for those of you who are currently in a live-in or live-on, that sometimes it's hard to separate the home and the work life because you live and work in the same place. And so as a result, we see that housing professionals will sometimes leave the field after 5 years or so. And so hopefully by thinking about other areas outside, that gives you some ideas about how, if you do love housing, what else can you do in housing? So with that, so why consider? So we talked a little bit about, sometimes it's real easy for us, and I'm not going to go in the order I have them here, so I apologize for that for people who like to go 1, 2, 3. But it's real important. Sometimes you can get in a rut, right? Or you're like, I keep doing the same thing. I'm not sure I'm getting the growth, and so sometimes looking at something outside of, and when I say traditional residence life, so like I'm talking like the res ed and res life. So just the more the people side in terms of the work that's happening and working with the students. So just for context here, I want to give that. But sometimes, the need to get out of the rut, to kind of think about remotivated or recharged, or just maybe a different perspective or things to see. And part of that goes into kind of expanding your skill set and giving you a competitive edge. So maybe you do some really great things in terms of advising and that, but maybe you also are somebody who maybe was a business undergrad person, and so maybe you're real sharp with numbers and the finance piece. So there's things like that to consider as well, your past experiences. Lateral moves are something that's definitely a thing you can do to get that new experience. So maybe maybe you're not moving up, but you're moving across in order to get some different experiences in different areas that again will just enrich and enhance your skills and your talents that you bring to an organization. It gives you also sometimes a big picture understanding of housing and other areas of a department, just to be able to get that experience in a different area. For example, in our department, we have residential facilities, residence education, administrative services, and then our business finance area. And so getting that big picture and kind of how we all work together, I like to say that we're a four-legged stool, and without one-legged stool, we're not going to be as successful. So that it's just helping understand how we all contribute to the mission. And then obviously more options for positions and job advancement. So obviously, we have a lot of hall directors, right? Because we have a lot of residence halls. But if you are wanting to advance in housing, we know that positions in leadership sometimes are not as many as what we have in our entry-level positions. An option for us to consider too, to still stay in housing, but maybe in a different area, so that you can advance. So some of the areas that we kind of brainstormed and we considered, in terms of thinking within we're using university housing. We know everybody calls it something different in their departments, but in a housing department, assessment is one of those areas that when I started back in the day, assessment wasn't something that we necessarily would have had a person who would have been doing that. But that's definitely a position that you can look at in your department. For some of the schools that still might have a self-op dining services, that's a great opportunity as well to use your skills. Conference services, family or graduate housing, emergency and risk management. This seems to be one that's more of a recent trend for positions in housing departments. your IT folks. Love our IT folks. They save my bacon a lot when I'm working on stuff, so I appreciate that. So, Greek housing, which is Jordan. We'll talk a little more about that in a minute. HR is obviously something, and particularly if you're in a large department where you might need somebody who's real focused on that and can help with ensuring that we're staffing and retaining our staff and helping them capitalize on their talent and their skills. Our facilities areas, for those of us who do manage our own facilities instead of perhaps putting everything to your physical plant or your facilities management area for your institution. Assignments and occupancy management, which we know can be a challenge, and I think we're all facing some challenges right now living through our pandemic. Marketing and communications or strategic communications, and then finance and business services. So we're about to share our journeys, and like I said, we're all at different points in our journeys and have all kind of gone some different routes. But again, it kind of highlights kind of how we've got to where we are. And so we're going to go ahead and start with Jordan.
Yes, I get to kick us off as the newbie, more recent professional, and I will be fully transparent that I was somebody who came into student affairs pretty adamant I would never work in university housing. I was not a housing person, and so my path and my journey to get to where I am is really different compared to Jake and Felicia, but I think it's happened exactly how it was supposed to be. And I'm appreciative for it. And so I started out, I went to grad school at a really small private religious institution, Newman University, where I was a grad assistant for first year experience on a small campus. If any of you are from the smaller campus situation, then you know you wear a lot of different hats. So while I was mostly in orientation, first year experience, grad assistant, that also meant I lived in the first year residence hall, and I was essentially a hall director, kind of overseeing that experience and overseeing our RAs. But then I moved on to my first role was at the University of Central Arkansas, where I was an assistant director for student life, which really just means I was the Panhellenic sorority advisor. So I thought that was going to be my kind of career and my trajectory, that I'd stay there kind of a while, or that I would continue in the fraternity and sorority space. And while I am a professional sorority woman and I love student life and kind of all of those functional areas, I'm really happy that I've now landed where I'm at the University of Arkansas as the assistant director for Greek managed housing. And what I kind of want to highlight about my journey and my journey to housing is that Greek housing, if any of you have Greek housing on your campus, sometimes it's located in university housing and sometimes it's not. On many universities, Greek housing is in the student life department, or the fraternities and sororities own their own houses and the university doesn't oversee it at all. So this was a really unique position and a really unique situation and opportunity that presented itself for me, and I'm glad that I jumped at it. This is also a position that is in our administrative services wing of the department, as Felicia kind of already mentioned, which means I get to really see all of the back end and behind the scenes work of how we not only manage our fraternity and sorority houses that we own, but also our residence halls. And I think that's a unique experience as well. And I also just kind of wanted to highlight about my particular journey, although I love student affairs and I feel like I am a career student affairs person. I am not a woo and I am not a programmer, and those are not the typical things that I enjoy, that I think a lot of people in student affairs are really great at. I love the administrative side of things and kind of the behind the scenes stuff that helps make sure our students are having a good experience. And so I'm thankful that that's exactly where my position is within university housing, so that I get to see all of that, but also I'm doing a job that matches my skill set, and I'm a lot happier because of that. And so, yeah, that's my journey. I love being in university housing and being here at the University of Arkansas, and I'm now a housing person. I've eaten my words, and I wouldn't have it any other way, but I'm excited to kind of see where else my journey goes within university housing here at the University of Arkansas or elsewhere. And I'll hand it off to Jake.
Yeah, so similar to what Jordan had said, I actually, if you would have asked me when I first got the calling, so to speak, for going into student affairs, I would have told you I'd be working in a union right now. I grew up in college in student activities, like campus activities, like that was my home. And so it wasn't until my 5th year of undergrad that I actually became an RA, and that was kind of what set things in motion. I had an assistantship in grad school working in residence life, and so that kind of like again furthered me getting into the to this area. And then my first professional position, which actually I just realized that it will be 10 years this summer that I started, was at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. And so there as resident director, and I'll talk more so about that experience just because that's where a lot of the stuff that I had that set a lot of things in motion for my career began. So later I realized that responsibility is my top strength and for the Clifton strength. And so it makes sense now looking back on it that when I was being trained as the only RD that was hired that summer, that when my supervisor told me, think of your building as your baby and your responsibility is basically to help it grow, that really was what set a lot of stuff in motion for me. I threw myself headfirst into that first position, really focusing on developing the communities within there. I had some themed communities that I oversaw, and also collaborating with pretty much anybody and everybody that touched on those communities, whether it be different offices within student affairs or different colleges that touched with that had interaction with those as well. And so that really did play a big part in me learning about different areas. It wasn't just the people within the building, but I also focused heavily on the facilities and how the building physically ran as well. And so that really, again, and just administrative processes to make sure that things were running smoothly, led into a lot of what later became me working within operations facilities, and then even career conference services like I am now. And so I think that for me, a big part of that was investing in the legacy of a building. So Frank Franz Hall, which is the picture that's showed here, that was my residence hall. It's where the Honors College is housed, and I became one with the legacy of that building, and not just my own legacy on campus. And I think in many ways that helped too, of me just kind of like really taking everything on and being able to learn. Developing relationships was a big part for me too. So I am first generation, and so I come from a family of blue collar folks, and so it felt very natural to connect with the folks who were working within the building. So within maintenance, within the custodial services that we had, and really developing those relationships and taking interest in not only the work that they were doing, but how their work contributed to the success and experience that our students were having on campus. Um, Being on call was a big thing. I hated having to call maintenance in for simple things after hours if it was something that I could help fix myself. And so I did spend a lot of time asking questions about the processes and how things worked. And I think that it helped for them. I think they appreciated me taking an interest in their work, but then also viewing them as a partner and really kind of like honoring that partnership. And even when it came to students of concern or students who were maybe struggling in some areas, our maintenance guy for that building, Mr. Connie, he knew it. And a lot of times he would bring stuff to our attention that we didn't know just because he was around the buildings and students loved him and would say hey to him and they talked to him in the hallway. And so those partnerships became very, very important. And I think really taking advantage of every opportunity. And so, especially when I was at UAH, I was in several roles. That was over a period of 6 years. Uh, it would be a whole other conversation of different things that were going on, but there were a lot of changes that we had within our staff and within our department at the time. And so it was really just taking opportunities to learn different areas. The relationships and things I'd learned working within my building helped me to be able to advance and be in different roles in our department that helped us as well grow. Yeah. And then next we'll turn it over to Felicia.
So I would say seasoned is the word I like to use for where I'm at in my career. Um, I like Jake. I'm a first generation college student. In fact, I'm the only one of my siblings we've all gone different routes and gotten different trainings and that. But I'm the only one with the who went to college, a 4-year institution in that. Um, so I kind of have figured stuff out along the way and sometimes tripped into stuff, it feels like. So, and one of those things was being an RA. And I was an RA for 3 years, and I, I am like the classic person who I don't think I had student affairs on my radar until my undergrad was at a quarter system. And winter quarter of my senior year, I was sitting in a media ethics class, and I was like, I can't do this. And I went to my professor, and I just, I talked to Dr. His name was Michael Bouget. I talked to Dr. Bouget, and I was like, Dr. Bouget, I can't do this gig. And this is in February of my senior year, and I'm graduating in June. So I kind of was one of those people who I wasn't on the ball. I didn't have my grad school applications done. Um, when I graduated, I had put in an application, but didn't have an assistantship, and one fell on my lap there at my alma mater because that's where I ended up staying. And then had the opportunity after one full year of grad school, uh, getting a full-time hall director position and putting me at part-time status for as a master's student for 2 years. So I'm kind of one of those people who just kind of um, I ended up where I ended up, kind of like what Jordan said, just by happenstance. Sometimes you can plan stuff and sometimes you can't. But I had people there who believed in me and saw potential in me, and so I guess has gave me opportunities. And so, when I was a hall director for my first full-time job, the institution I was at, it was residence life was just residence life as a department of residence life and was under student affairs, and then everything else. So like our dining services, and our facilities for the campus and our custodial services were all under auxiliary services. Now those two offices were next to each other in the office building, but they had two different direct report lines and everything. And so I really only saw one side of residence life, and so that was what my frame of reference was, right? That was my context. Um, and then after I completed my master's degree, I went to a small church affiliated institution in Lynchburg, Virginia, called Lynchburg College. It's now Lynchburg University. Um, and again, um, one of those, when I was in grad school, I really thought I have to have a plan and this whole very sequential plan, right? Um, but that was when we also were in the period where there was going to be declines in enrollment. And I found out, I got this job at Lynchburg College, and I was one person in a 3-person office in terms of full-time professional staff. And and I was the last one in, and I was the first person let go whenever there was some um, uh, budget cutting that had to happen. So, my first full-time position past my alma mater, that was an eye opener for me. So, um, that kind of shaped how I kind of have approached my career, I guess, for the rest of my for the rest of my tenure that I've been doing is that not having a timeline or a specific plan to guide my career, but really the opportunities piece. And again, it's the connectedness is one of my top 5. And it's those connections and those relationships. And it just so happened if I didn't even know where Wisconsin was, but one of my grad school friends called me in May and said, "Hey, we've got a late opening as a hall director. Do you want to come up here to Wisconsin?" And I interviewed and I got the job. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing or where I was going, and Anne was my only person that I knew there. And so it's just kind of been one of those things that shaped me. And that's really my first experience with a university housing operation. So where we had facilities within our department and the business operations and that. And so that kind of really helped give me a different lens or something to look at. I then kind of had a year out of the profession, which was very eye-opening because I was in my significant other, my partner, he also was in higher ed, and so he got a job, and I kind of followed him, and I actually worked temp work for a year, and that was a very it was kind of a refresher for me, and really a chance for me to kind of really examine, is higher ed what I want to do? And it was. So I get the job here at the University of Arkansas, and again, Arkansas was not necessarily a place that I ever saw in my journey. But I got the call, came up here and interviewed. Um, we were living in Central Arkansas at the time because my husband was working at another school there, and got the job. I had never heard of Fayetteville. It was like the year after the Razorbacks won the national basketball championship. I didn't know anything about Arkansas, but anyhow, I'm here. Um, and had an area coordinator position, and then as we kind of did some growth and restructuring, had a chance to go and work in our family housing and our graduate housing, and it was, that was something, again, was not necessarily something I ever would have, I didn't have any experience with per se, but it was probably one of the most enriching parts of um, my tenure, I guess, so in housing and that, because I literally had a community that had people from 33 countries in the world. And some of those people today I still see around town or keep in touch with. And that to me, it was an older apartment complex. We had lots of facility issues and that. And people were like, oh, and I'm like, you all see the old buildings and I see the people. I see the community that happens. And that's what I loved. But again, that was not something I was actually doing an apartment contract. We were doing occupancy management, not something and that I had in my plan. But it really, I think, has helped enrich me and helped me see again um, the big picture in terms of what we need to be able to run our department, and like Jake talked about, the relationships with other staff. So like our maintenance and our housekeeping staff, I had really strong relationships with them. And that was so important to me to help me understand the big picture of what's needed. So if I said, oh, this should be an easy fix, and they're like, no, it's really not, they helped me understand why it was not. I think some of the other things is, obviously, as things change, sometimes there's departmental changes that happen. Um, they're based on what is happening on campus in terms of direction, mission, changes in leadership on campus. And so I have ended up in a couple different positions as a result of that. I worked in our HR area for 3 years, and learned so much. That was very, very eye-opening for me. It helped, again, me see the larger picture and understand the whole hiring process and this and that. And it was amazing. It was such a valuable experience for me to have. And then I wandered back into residence education. I did some operations within residence education, some programmatic pieces, and now I'm over in administrative services. So now I have officially worked in 3 areas of our department. The only area I've not worked in is facilities. And this position I'm in now is really good because I'm getting a chance to focus on like emergency and risk management and making sure we have staff trained, and what kind of education are we doing, or blog posts, etc., that are going to help our students and our staff have good information as they make decisions out in our halls and out on our campus. So things I've learned along the way. One of the things I do is I work with CCTV, and particularly managing our video process. Again, not one of those skills I ever would have thought, but I have learned so much in terms of the relationships I have with our IT area and our facilities area to kind of help understand the big picture. We all kind of work together to kind of manage that process and ensure that we're um, utilizing our CCTV system in a way that respects the privacy of our students, but also allows us to respond to issues that may be occurring, and also working with our conduct office, our Title IX office, or our police department. And so that's been really valuable. Um, I'm also working with our we have a scholarship, a housing family scholarship for some of our housing staff dependents, and that's a really amazing opportunity too. So, bottom line, learning um, learning different skills that I would have never had in my scope, I think have really allowed me to just have an increased understanding of our department, we interact on campus and the role we play. Um, I also have an institutional and departmental knowledge and history. So I'm also, as Jordan calls me, the knower of things. So sometimes I'll get those kinds of questions because I have that. And I'm just really fortunate that to be in a place that I have enjoyed working, serving our students in the state of Arkansas, and to have the opportunities to have some wide ranging job experiences. So for that, I'm very fortunate. And I don't think that if you had asked me that when I was starting my graduate program, I don't think any of this would have been on my radar, but it's taking advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, so as we kind of think about now, you've heard from our journey, so we want to kind of help you shape your journey a little bit. And so we have this kind of opportunity to create a university housing career development plan, assuming that many of you and us will stay kind of in housing because there's so many opportunities. But I'll preface this that this plan is not meant to be like set in stone. You don't have to follow it to a T for the rest of your life. Um, Things are going to change, opportunities are going to present themselves. Maybe that opportunity ends up being outside of university housing. Maybe it's at a different campus that has just different functional areas, different opportunities there. And so things are going to shift, and that's totally okay. I will also say, like, when we think about a career development plan, many of us have probably already done this or maybe did this subconsciously while we were in grad school. I know for me, I came into grad school and I was like, I'm going to be a VP of Student Affairs one day, but had no way to know how I was going to get there. Now I'm not so sure that's the right plan for me, but in my mind, I knew I wanted to work for fraternity sorority life and that I was going to kind of keep moving up, but that's not where I'm at now. So that's okay if you've already kind of thought about things, but sometimes it's nice to have a more formal process, so writing it out, or just talking it through and keeping it in mind, keeping it, stashed with your resume so you can always kind of look back to it. We have uploaded kind of a format with more questions and more information, like a worksheet kind of that can help you along the way. So be sure and check that out if that's something you're interested in. But when we create this plan, the first thing is to identify your starting point. And well, wait, go back. Yep, are your starting point of where are you now in your career, and is it exactly where you want to be? And then you're going to think about, like, where do you want to go in your career? Where in university housing do you want to end up? I think some of us don't have as large of departments as the University of Arkansas, so I think you have to also look at other campuses and see what other options there are. As Felicia's already described, she's been in so many roles in this one department. That's a unique situation as well. So think about that. The gaps, so identify what obstacles you need to overcome, what areas of growth are there for you to get to your destination, and then the route, which is how are we going to close that gap so that we can get to that position that you want to be in within university housing. Now you can go.
Yeah, so to start, it really is about like identifying where you are, and that's usually the best way to kind of determine where you want to go. I would say with this, it's helpful to, and I'm sure that unfortunately, probably everybody has been in a position at some point in your life or a situation that wasn't ideal and it made you feel some kind of way about it. Starting kind of like this reflection process before that happens is helpful so that we don't have those additional emotions that are kind of weighing in. But definitely taking some time to look at, what are your natural skills and talents? I know that especially for those of us who grew up in different leadership opportunities that we took within our college experiences, you've probably done a variety of different assessments. So I mentioned earlier Clifton Strengths, which probably had the most major impact on my life and my own career journey. But then things like the True Colors or Myers-Briggs, and using those for inspiration to really see kind of like where your strengths lie and focusing more on that versus things that you're not good at. Just because you might get a little bit better, but your strengths are really kind of like where your power is. And really thinking as well about like just the natural role that you play within your team currently. So are you that person who's the natural organizer, the cheerleader, the one that people turn to for advice, or if they're just going through some experiences that they need help with, and kind of playing with that as well. So if you're great at mediating, that's an awesome skill to have, especially working within housing. Um, And also thinking just about like what led you in the first place to a career within university housing. Like I said, my path initially started with me going into campus activities, but I loved being able to see students develop over the period of time and not just see kind of like these snapshots of what my events on campus were doing to the folks I would see every couple weeks. And so that was one of the things that connection was really important to me in my going into and staying in university housing. And think about also like other than a paycheck, which is obviously motivation, but I'm sure hopefully that's not the only thing. But what motivates you with your career to wake up in the morning and to keep on going? And I know especially working with first year students, I would always pay attention to and ask them about what interests them, what got them excited, and seeing those things that they would just naturally geek out on or would make their eyes light up as they were talking about it. Those are the things that I think as professionals we need to pay attention to as well, because that's really going to be a driving force in getting us to where we want to be, not where we think we should be. And for me, it was recognizing that sweet spot between working with people, which I loved, and working with processes, which is kind of a guilty pleasure, and I really love kind of like that intersection of those two areas. So just paying attention to those natural things as well.
So next step is to identify your destination, the next kind of position that you you want to be in. And so for the newer professionals, that could be, where do you see yourself in 2 to 5 years? Is that, you're currently a coordinator? Do you want to be an assistant director? Do you want to be, if you're on a smaller campus, do you just want to be on a bigger campus and make that lateral move? What does that look like? Same for mid-level, more seasoned professionals. Where do you see yourself in kind of the longer term? But this is your opportunity to brainstorm those opportunities and where you can see yourself. And so, as I kind of already mentioned, that's like looking at a housing department, looking at different positions and kind of just seeing where your skill sets match. And is that something that you're interested in? Greek housing was not something I really ever thought about. I'm familiar with fraternity and sorority and with housing and what that looks like, but every campus is so different. Most campuses I had worked with, the houses were owned by the fraternities and sororities, so the university wasn't involved in it. So I wouldn't have thought of this as a position, but now that I know that it's a position, it's one that I can keep in my pocket if I ever decide to look somewhere else or on other campuses. I know what to look for in that kind of position. But you're going to look at where do you see yourself next, and maybe that's a couple different options as well. You don't have to say like, well, I'm a coordinator, I want to be an assistant director. Or I'm an assistant director and I want to be a director. Not all of us are meant to be directors. Not all of us are going to be assistant directors right after being a coordinator. You're going to jump around a little bit. So have a few different options, a few different positions you can see yourself in a few different kind of areas that you might be able to do.
Right, and then kind of once you've identified where you want to go, like your destination, the next is looking at you kind of doing a gap analysis, which sounds fancy, but really it's just about connecting the dots. Um, and so it's a great place for me. I know that my experience that I do is I actually start by going to like hireatjobs.com or a similar site, just to see job descriptions for positions that I might be interested in down the road. I think sometimes that helps, especially if they say like what the pay is, what the benefits, um, but especially what they're looking for, and kind of being able to identify, are you at a place where you're ready to apply for that? So if you're looking at a director position for housing down the road, start looking at those things to see, what they're looking at and kind of like where you need to get some more experience. And definitely take advantage of the resources that you have available to you all over your campus. Speak with colleagues about their experiences working in these different areas. Generally speaking, folks appreciate when other people take interest in the work that they do, especially because for those of us in student affairs, so much passion is usually behind our reasons for the work that we do. And so asking the questions, most people aren't going to, be off put by that. Just make sure that it doesn't sound like you're going after their position, because I've had that happen a couple of times and it gets awkward fast. But in those conversations, ask about the skills and experiences that they feel has led to success in that particular area, or their interactions with students or campus partners. Because I know that one thing that I really didn't acknowledge when I was starting off is the more that you move up in positions, it feels like the further you get away from that daily student interaction. And so obviously that could be a huge factor for some people. And then also like look into like professional organizations or conferences that they utilize. That could be a thing as well. It's different additional resources that you could look into, or you know, kind of like planning out ways that if you were to go in that area that you can network, and then you know what they would have done differently in the journey that they had getting into that position. Like I said, you know, the personal and individualization is one of my top 10. So I mean, I live for this stuff, but personal stories and life lessons are everything. And if you could learn from somebody else's what they would consider a mistake to avoid the same kind of thing in your own journey, take advantage of it, because that's definitely stuff that's super helpful. And then really once you've done that, it's reassessing your qualifications and kind of looking back to see, you know, are the skills and experiences that you currently have ready for that next step, or do you need to take some more time developing those? You know, I know especially when I was going into looking at different positions, StarRes was the program that every university seemed to have that utilize, and I didn't have experience with. And so, you know, for me in that, I worked with other programs, and so I could speak to that. But it also helps to know kind of like where those gaps are and what you have versus what somebody else, what a university might be looking for. Um, and then also, you know, are there items in your current position description that you're not fully utilizing? So you might see something in the director position description that you're just like, yes, I want to do this, but I don't think I have enough experience with it. Look at your own. Go back and look at your own and see, because you might find that some of the stuff that's already in your position is going to get you where you want to go, and you just maybe didn't think about it in that aspect before. And then really once you've identified those gaps, the next thing is to put together a game plan.
Yeah, so now it's time to do the thing, and create a plan of action. And so, like we've said before, this doesn't have to be like a concrete, actual, this is how this is going to go, but it's a great starting point. And so to branch off of what Jake was just describing of like identifying your gaps, now you're going to identify like what am I going to do to resolve those gaps and those opportunities for growth so that I can get to the next place. So I think a lot about in my current position, I work with our fraternity houses and I'm on our administrative services side, but I do StarRes, but like not a lot. I'm not a pro, but I would love to know more about like assignments, and I'd love to know more about how to actually do the assignments and upload certain things for charging and all of the back end stuff that our assignment folks do that I just don't know about. So that would be something, that's a gap for me, that I've set up some meetings with our people in our department just so I can learn it, so that I can, at the next step, maybe I'm a director of residence life or I'm an associate director of admin services, I'm able to speak to those things. So it's just simple things like that, of like, maybe I want to be a director of residence life one day, maybe I don't, but this would be something that I would need to know to kind of get there. But also it's going to help me in my current role too. So a lot of these things could help you just in your regular day. But are there ways you can incorporate what you want as a professional into your current position? That's kind of what I just spoke to, that particular example will help me in my current role. I might not need to utilize it all the time, but it's something that could. But that's something I spoke with my supervisor about, of, hey, these are things that this is an area where I feel like I need to know more information about. Do you feel like that would be something I could learn more about? And he helped facilitate that. So don't be afraid to advocate for yourself to create these opportunities within your department, so that you are set up for success. And it's not a conversation about like, I'm trying to leave, and so I'm trying to set myself up so that I can leave. That's not what it is. It's more of a, hey, I want to learn more, and I want to gain different skills so that I'm just a more well-rounded professional. And I think any supervisor or director would appreciate that. But it's also important to kind of organize a timeline of how you're going to complete this, what that will look like throughout your year, and make sure it's aligned with your intended outcome. I'm still kind of a newer professional, like I've mentioned, and I'm only a year into this role, so I plan to be here for a while in this position. So I'm just thinking about what can I do in the next 3 years in my role that might set me up for what my next position could be. But maybe you're towards the end of that and you want to you have a year where you'd like to start applying or looking for a director position or whatever it might be. But organize your timeline and think about, what can I do throughout my year? What things do I still need to do, and create that so that you're set up for success. But also know this is fluid and this could change, and that life happens and opportunities present themselves when you least expect it. So your plan of action could change. It could shape all kinds of different ways. You might decide that you thought, you wanted to move into residence education, and you wanted to be, an assistant director over there, and you wanted to be over RAs and CREs. CREs are coordinators, I guess. But maybe that changes. Maybe you realize your skills are more aligned somewhere else. And that's okay too. So you can shift your plan as needed to get you to where you want to be.
Yeah, and as we're wrapping up our part of this, if we were all in person and asked for a show of hands of, if you had sage advice for, grad students or new professionals, just in terms of for like what to consider in their career journeys, I'm sure multiple hands in the room would shoot up, just because, the longer we spend in the field, the more we learn about ourselves and just kind of like the process in general. And so we wanted to share some of the lessons that we've learned kind of collectively. And so the first is really just manage your expectations. And I think this is incredibly important for young professionals, just because, we remind children all the time to not be in such a hurry to grow up, I guess, teenagers. And so enjoy the process. Like I said, there's so many opportunities that you could take opportunities that you could take advantage of when you're in those entry level positions, whether it's working in different committee work or just being able to learn processes when you're not responsible for managing them, that really can help you learn and grow. When we talk to first year students, typically they're taking classes and exploring things to find out their interests. That way they're not in their fourth year and then deciding that they want to do something completely different. And so I think the same kind of thing, man, goes to new professionals of just kind of not getting caught in the comparison game with your peers. You'll notice, especially as you start having conversations with your colleagues and other folks, in just terms of like how they got into their position. So if you are somebody who wanted to be a VP or wants to be a VP of student affairs, talk to the person in that position and listen to their story, because you're going to hear that their journey to that position may look very different than what you thought. And when you look at the timeline, it's possibly, over a much longer span than what you're hoping to for yourself. But keep in mind that there are a lot of unique factors and circumstances that impact the journey that we have in our careers. And so, like I said, like I had several positions at U of H, and it was because of changes in the department, changes in staff, that opened up opportunities for me to take advantage of. And I think that's really a big thing too, is just taking advantage of those opportunities. But I will say too, especially for young professionals, is to make sure that you're mastering your current responsibilities, your areas of responsibilities, before you start out on these different, missions to learn everything. Just because when folks on campus and within your department are seeing you kicking butt and taking names on the things that's actually in your job description, they're going to be much more excited and willing to bring you on to work in different projects or committees that they have going on. And utilizing as well, just like if you're interested in facilities, look at your building or look at your position and see how you can connect with these different areas in the role that you're already working in. University housing is definitely complex and has many moving parts. And so, as Jordan had talked about earlier, don't be afraid to ask questions, because it definitely helps quite a bit. When it comes to your professional development, make sure that you're thinking forward in terms of for what you're doing. So utilize your career plan, so that way you're focusing your energy on developing your strengths and not just kind of going to random things that may not necessarily be adding up to you become the awesome professional that you know that you're going to be. And I think it's super important, again, especially for young professionals, to recognize that you are in the driver's seat of your professional development. I've seen a lot of folks come into the field who, it's almost like they're baby birds in a nest with their mouth open, waiting for somebody to feed them. And really, there's so many things around you that can help you develop. We're in the middle of a pandemic. I'm just saying, we are all developing if we're taking opportunities of kind of like looking at the stuff that we're doing. And really seek out positions that align with your strengths and your skill set. Own your strengths and trust your gut. I think your intuition is going to be your best guide as you're going through this. And don't make apologies or feel like you're an outcast or you don't fit in because of those different things that you might love that may not stand out with the rest of the group that you're with.
It's okay to love administrative stuff too, is
Yes.
basically what we're saying, because we are the analytical, strategic, process-oriented folks of student affairs, and that is okay.
Yep.
So just a few other lessons or some other advice. Lateral moves are okay and actually I think normal in our field. And I've done quite a bit of lateraling within our department, but it's okay to lateral to another institution because not every department, every other school is the same as yours. And so there's always going to be new opportunities and new experiences for you if you do a lateral, and that's okay. Housing positions outside of that traditional residence life and area, residence education area, does give you that larger understanding of housing as a whole. And I think, if anything, if you have that traditional residence life and residence education background, you're an asset in another area because you can help create a better understanding of student development. This is why students do what they do, and here's how we can work together as a team, etc. Because you're in that generalist role a lot of times when you're in that residence education area. Um, it's also, okay to not aspire to be a director or a vice president. I think it's fine to be in that mid-level professional role, assistant or associate director. Um, there's perks, obviously, to being a director or VP, but I think, there's also, I think, uh, value in having people who have great experience or a good skill set in that mid-level role who can help the VP or help the director achieve the goals of the department or the division. And this is the thing I think that's important for me because I connect this as my top 5. I am somebody who typically builds relationships with students, and have been doing that over my career. Um, and and the thing is even if your position is one, if you're going to a position in another area, and it's not one that has that direct, daily, constant contact with students, you're still having an impact on students and their success, right? Because the work that you're doing is setting the foundation for those students to be successful. And I think ultimately nobody in our department is working in our department if they didn't have a desire to work on the university campus or work with students, right? And that we're all working together towards that goal of helping our students graduate from the University of Arkansas, and so that they could go out and be ambassadors and do good work out in the world. And so I think that's really important. And what I know I have done is create opportunities for me to have interactions with students. One of the things I'm involved in on our campus is we have a campus-based NASPA undergraduate fellowship program, and I'm involved with coordinating that and have been a mentor for enough fellow, and we'll do that in the future too as well. Um, Jake and I were some of the student affairs staff who go out there. We work in the student section at the basketball games. We just did that on Wednesday night when we beat Alabama. And so while that our role in that is making sure students are behaving properly and wearing their mask and everything. It's fun to be there with them and have that energy and to experience that with them. I was fist bumping students as they were leaving the other night because everybody was on such a high. And so, but again, um, your your work is having an impact if you're on our students, even if you're not working with them every day directly. And so that's the thing that I know I value the most. So we thought we liked this quote from "Oh, the Places You'll Go." You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself any direction you choose. And so we hope today that you've had a chance to get some thoughts in your head, and maybe some time, maybe carve out some time for any reflections that you want to do on your career. We have just a couple of minutes. If anybody has any questions or comments, you can drop that in the chat box. I know that for sure we definitely want to share with you. Of course, we did a little bit of reading, and that just to kind of reaffirm and do some research. But I know that Lexi will want to make sure we tell you to do the evaluation. Thank you. We appreciate your feedback in that. Any questions, thoughts? Yep, there it is. There's the evaluation form in the chat. Well, I, for me, I've enjoyed the opportunity to reflect on my own journey. It's been really cool to sit down with Jordan and Jake as we've gone through planning this presentation. So having that reflection time, and so I thank you all for attending. I don't know if Jordan or Jake have any final thoughts.
Yeah,
We also thank you for attending.
Yeah.
Take care, you all, and thank you again. And we hope to see you at a future Swakuho.
Thank you so much, Felicia, Jake, Jordan. Everyone, utilize the chat and give them a big round of applause for such a great presentation and taking the opportunity to present to us and share their experiences. We do kindly ask that you take a few moments to fill out that evaluation for us, and we would greatly appreciate it.